All right, for today's video review, we're going to be taking a look at Transformers Age of the Primes Deluxe Class, the 13 Alchemist Prime. And yeah, obviously you knew I was going to be excited for this figure since the channel is named after this character. And yeah, I had a custom one before in my collection, but it's great to actually get a a proper rendition of this character in plastic form. Yet, honestly, I don't actually have that much of a specific attachment to Alchemist Prime as a character or as a design. Honestly, I just kind of like the name, which is more of the reason why I named the channel that. But either way, he is a very cool figure, and it's great to get another of the 13 primes, of course. And yeah, he looks pretty good in his vehicle mode. The one caveat I will say is that it looks just like way, 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 way too earthy for my tastes. Like, this looks like a souped-up military vehicle. Like, it's got some sci-fi elements to it, but this does not look like a Cybertronian vehicle, I don't think, much at all. This is definitely more in like the siege kind of realm of Cybertronian vehicles, where they just feel like Earth vehicles with some different techie detail on them. Like, he's got like I don't know, like a bumper up here. He's got headlights. Obviously, he's got the windshield there. And, I think that they were steering a little bit further in the direction of earthy type vehicles than I would prefer for the, 13 primes who would never have been to Earth and would have presumably been long gone by the time that, the Autobots and Decepticons made it to Earth. But, whatever. I can tolerate it. It does make me wonder if this is like a pre-tool for some other figure. Like, honestly, if we didn't already have the listings knowing that Swindle was going to be a Voyager, I would be suspicious that, this was some kind of pre-tool for Swindle in some way. But also, since they're probably going to be making Swindle more of like a open top Jeep to make him more G1 accurate, I don't really think that this figure could be a pre-tool of him. But I don't know. I'm not really sure what their plans are for this mold, but I don't love the vehicle mode as Alchemist Prime. It is a nice looking vehicle mode, but I can kind of live with that. It rolls decently well. He doesn't have pinned wheels. He's got the clipped on wheels, but that's okay. And then, of course, he comes with his artifact, which is the lens here, which you can combine. It doesn't slide together. It actually, there's like a tab and a slot, so you actually have to kind of press it together, and then you have the lens there, which is kind of neat. Of course, with the Alchemist Prime symbol on it that they made for Power of the Primes. And there's a couple other symbols on here, too. I don't know if they'll show up there. Sure, some people recognize some of these. That one does look familiar to me, but I can't totally remember what it's from. But either way, some interesting little details there. In terms of storage, you are supposed to just kind of split it and peg it onto the top, which usually would bother me. But honestly, I think that this goes a long way towards making his vehicle mode look a little bit more alien, so it doesn't really bother me. I wish it was a little bit more maybe cleanly integrated, but good enough. But yeah, so decent vehicle mode. I just feel like it's a little bit too earthy for my tastes. But yeah, in terms of comparisons in this mode, here is with Kingdom Sideswipe, so you can see what they look like together. Here he is with the other Age of the Primes, 13 primes that we've gotten so far, with Solus and Prima and the Fallen there, and they all look pretty cool together. Again, I think that his is definitely the worst offender of looking a little bit too earthy, but they're all decent enough there together. And yeah, to get onto transformation, some people have compared him to the like Siege Ironhide mold, which I can see a couple of comparisons there. I don't think it's quite as egregious as people have been making it seem. Like, he shares a couple design sensibilities that come from that figure, but it doesn't really feel like, it doesn't feel like as obvious of a redo as like the how what was it? There was one figure that really felt like Dead End from Combiner Wars. I think it was Wild Rider from Legacy really felt like it had all the same engineering things as Dead End from Combiner Wars. It doesn't even feel that close, but yeah, either way, we'll just take off the lens for now, and then we can take this entire back section and just split it here. It'll unpeg from itself. Kind of tricky actually to grab because it does peg in pretty securely. There we go. And then just open these sections up, and then you can kind of bring the legs they'll untab from the sides here and just bring them down for now so that you have the clearance to take these panels with the arms on them, untab them from the windshield and each other, and they will flip around like this. And then while you're flipping them around, you also want to take these sections and just close them in. And then these little like steps, I guess, another thing that makes it a little bit too earthy, because why would a Cybertronian have steps on the side? These steps will kind of turn into tabs that will clip into these sections here, which is kind of clever. And then we can take the windshield and basically flip it back like that, and then take this whole section and flip it onto the back, and it will tab into the back there. Flip out the hands so they click into place. Then we can take the legs here. The feet are just inside the legs, so you can just rotate them out and then close these panels around, which I think is maybe the one step that feels the most like Siege Ironhide and Ratchet, but even then, not that much. I do wish these kind of like tabbed in some way, because they mostly just kind of sit there. Oh, wait a minute. Oh, never mind. Ignore me. Okay, I'd been doing that wrong. Yeah, so these do clip into place nicely, which is nice. And then you can rotate them around at the waist, bring the arms down, and last but not least, just open up the chest panel here, which can be kind of hard to get a grip on sometimes, and flip out the robot mode head and close it up. And there we have Alchemist Prime in his robot mode. And yeah, this is really where I think this figure shines. I adore this head sculpt. Obviously, they're combining a few different aesthetics here. He's like a combination of, there was, that old comic design for MacAdam, which is, heavily implied in most things, if not outright stated, that Alchemist Prime is MacAdam of MacAdam's Old Oil House, just, kind of hanging out on Cybertron and not getting involved, and just barkeeping. That's was definitely the case in Cyberverse, but so they're drawing from that old MacAdam design, saying that even that comic design was actually Alchemist Prime. They're giving them kind of like the bulkier proportions of the Cyberverse design. I'm not really sure where they're getting this like camo green from, because like, I don't know, in in the comic version, he was like really kind of this bright turquoise, and then obviously he was kind of like this orangey brown in Cyberverse, and then he was like silver basically in the Covenant of Primus. So I kind of wish they just went straight up for that like turquoise color, because that was really the design for Alchemist Prime that I would have preferred see the most, is that MacAdam design. And it definitely does lean like heavy enough into that design for my taste, but I do question the color choice a little bit. I kind of wish that they went with a brighter turquoise, but either way, he still looks pretty good. I'm loving this head sculpt with the the beard and the mustache there. That definitely comes from that old MacAdam design, and then the the goggles there that come from both the Covenant of Primus and then also the Cyberverse design. It's just a really nice head sculpt all around. But yeah, in terms of articulation, the head is on a ball joint here. It's kind of like located at the very back, like the base of the neck, which is a little bit weird when you're rotating his head. You can also use that transformation joint to have him like look down a little bit. I find that he like kind of juts his head forward a little bit in a way that I don't totally love, but there's a way that I've kind of found to remedy that I'll get into in a sec. The shoulders here are just on universal joints, so they can rotate around and go out to the side. He's got a bicep swivel, about 90 degrees of bend at the elbow. The wrists can only bend in. I wish he had wrist swivels. Again, I'll explain that in a sec, but he's got a nice waist cut here. He's got kind of a scrunched up torso, which I don't necessarily mind, but is kind of funny. He's got universal joints at the hips, which can go forward and back, and out to the side. Thigh swivels, 90 degrees of bend at the knee. He's got ankle tilt, and then for transformation, he does have this like slight wiggle, but it's not really enough to make anything like super noticeable in terms of a forward or backward ankle tilt. Now, in terms of his like posture, I guess I kind of prefer to angle him back a little bit and then angle the head forward. So that he's standing up a bit more straight, but it means his chest and his waist are at a bit of an angle. It just gives him a better center of gravity, but it does mean that his waist swivel is now essentially at a bit of an angle, which I don't terribly mind, because honestly, it makes his posing a little bit more dynamic, because it kind of like cheats the effect of having like one hip raised basically. But yeah, so that's how I personally prefer to have him, rather than having this completely straight out, in which case I think his head kind of just like juts a little bit forward. It kind of looks like he's constantly about to fall over. Not that the figure is unstable in that way, but I just think it looks a little bit more natural that way. And it kind of like creates the effect of the wheels being a little bit more sunken into his chest as well, which is better in my opinion. And then obviously we can give him the lenses here, and you can do a few different things with them. You can give him them as like swords, basically, by putting them in his hands, and he's got these like little bitsy blades on the end there. We can do the thing where he's like holding these together and having them like actually, conjoin, so he's holding out the lenses. And this is really, really where I wish that this figure had a wrist swivel of some sort, because he can hold them just fine, but he does have to have his arms like completely straight out, which looks a little bit stiff and silly when he's just like boxing them out like that. It's not terrible, but it's, just a little bit stiffer than I prefer it to be. Whereas if he had a wrist swivel, then he can do that and then also like bend his elbows a little bit, which I think would look a bit more natural, but it's kind of a nitpick at the end of the day. Either way, I do think it's cool that he can actually hold this. I don't totally remember what the function of the lenses is supposed to be, so I'm not really sure what he's accomplishing by doing this, but either way, it's kind of cool looking. And then in terms of storage, you could, if you want, leave them combined. I think that there is a port on the back here. I don't know if it actually, the pegs are too shallow to actually reach that. You could peg it onto his arm like that, but then, kind of sticks out with the one peg there. Personally, I prefer to split it and then keep one section on one arm and one section on the other, just because I feel like that looks the cleanest. You can put them on his shoulders or on his forearms. I prefer the forearm look, but yeah, I don't know. I prefer that. I think that looks pretty good there. In terms of comparisons in this mode, here he is again with Kingdom's side, just so you can see, pretty much an average size Deluxe there, slightly taller than him, but not by a whole lot. Here he is with my previous kind of custom Alchemist Prime, which he definitely does a much better job at. This was, using the 2007 movie Protoform Starscream mold, just to have a kind of generic Cybertronian something kind of figure. And then I really went more for the design aesthetic of like the Covenant of Primus, where he's got the kind of, elemental thing going on, whereas I do much prefer this design. I prefer him kind of chunky and stocky, and I definitely prefer him in, looking more Generation style. But, this guy was a fun project, and he did the job for a while, but I definitely am happy to replace him. Here he is with a couple previous 13 Primes figures that aren't from Age of the Primes, with a Alpha Trion there and Vector Prime. I don't know if I'm going to get the new Alpha Trion. I think I've pretty much decided I'm passing on Vector Prime because this guy's good enough. But if they, do that new mold for Alpha Trion later with, this kind of head, or if I find out that this head would fit on that figure, then I might get it. But otherwise, I'm content with this guy for now. But I prefer the older Alpha Trion look, but whatever. And then last but not least, here he is again with the other Age of the Primes, 13 Primes that we've seen so far. And they're a good looking bunch. I really like the design aesthetic that they're choosing to go with for these guys. I just feel like they, have this ancient look about them, but they definitely fit in with, regular Generation style figures. I like the, choice to give him the beard and the mustache there. I feel like that really works for him. And then the big stupid looking goggles, I think, is just great. So yeah, I'm really liking these guys so far. Like I said, I'm not, I'm probably not going to get the new Micronus, and I'm probably not going to get the new Alpha Trion. We'll see down the line. I don't know. Excited for that new Onyx Prime that's coming out, and then we haven't really seen the other ones yet that they probably won't be doing till next year. But I'd love a new Quintus Prime. I'd love an Amalgamous Prime. I'd love a Liege Maximo. That I think that's the other custom one that I have right now that I think is in desperate need of a replacement. We haven't really seen much about those guys yet. I'm really curious to see what they do for Nexus Prime, because allegedly that figure is supposed to be a Voyager. So I don't really know how they're going to do a combiner with a Voyager figure, but trust them, I guess, because these figures have all been pretty nice so far. But yeah, either way, that's neither here nor there for Alchemist Prime himself. He's a really fun figure. He's definitely, I think my biggest gripe about him is just that the vehicle mode design just looks way too earthy. But other than that, I really like him. He's got a fun little transformation. He feels very solid joints wise. I love the design for his robot mode, even if I probably would have went for a lighter color personally, but I can live with it. I think that the lens, the way that they did that, was a really cool accessory. Again, would have been a little bit nicer if he had wrist swivels, but still pretty decent there. But yeah, that's pretty much all there is to him. If you enjoy my videos, make sure to leave a like and consider subscribing to the channel. I do reviews every Tuesday and Thursday, and without further ado, here we have Transformers Age of the Primes, the 13 Alchemist Prime.